Hello, my name is John Svek. Welcome to this All 24 video. Today, Coach Waterman and I are joined by a special guest. We have Coach Maxime Chaput Dupuy from Champlain. How you doing, Coach?
Good. How you guys doing?
Great.
Doing really well.
Glad to
So,
have
Coach is the defensive coordinator for the Cougars, and he's going to take us through some defensive stuff here on some press coverage. So, I'll just kind of give you the floor here, Coach.
All right. So let's go right into it.
Awesome.
So just to start off, right, a few key points to success for me in terms of defending the pass game, right, from a defensive perspective is we want to force low percentage throws, right? So how do you do that? Well, try to make sure the ball travels as much as possible, right? So take away some intermediate routes, some short routes, force the ball outside, force the ball vertical. I think the more you force the ball to travel, the more chances you have of it just dropping on the floor, right? Or you have a chance of your pressure getting there and forcing the quarterback to make a mistake, right? And how do you do that to me is, in terms of the coverage-wise, is basically win with leverage, right? So if you're playing man-to-man, we like to take away the inside, force outside release, force the receiver to run as much as possible. And same thing if you play a zone concept, right, is get those underneath defenders in the windows, make sure the ball is forced to the sideline, make sure the ball is forced vertical. I think the more you do that, the more chances you have of having a low percentage or completion percentage, and the more chances you have of getting off the field, right? So it's always what you want, defensive wise. And then the other thing is disrupt timing, obviously. So but you can disrupt timing by putting pressure on the quarterback. So whether you bring pressure, get a good stun, or just have a crazy athlete that's always in the backfield, right? All those things work. But the other thing to me that's real important is putting hands on the receiver. So in terms of zone concepts, we'll talk about rerouting a lot. And same thing in man. I'm a believer in playing press. I'm a believer in playing a little bit more of a catch technique, right? In terms of even regular man technique. We're not playing off that much. And if we do play off, well, we're bringing a lot of pressure, right? So we try to counter that space by taking time away, basically, right? So that's always kind of how we do this. Now, if we want to talk about the keys to press technique itself, so in terms of the keys to effective press coverage for me, first off is playing with proper eyes and feet, right? So what you want your eyes to be looking at the receiver's hips and feet. Don't get tangled up with those shoulders moving, those hands moving, right? Those are not dictators of where the receiver is going to go. So make sure you look at hips and feet. Mirror the first step of the receiver is real important. And so we're going to talk about releases a little bit later. And that's one thing that we put a lot of emphasis on, and we work a lot in practice. And I think if you win the release, you probably won 75 or 80% of the reps just by winning the release because you are disrupting timing, right? So we're going to talk about mirroring the first step. And the other thing is make sure you react, right? So don't guess, don't jump, don't try to play smart and do the first move, right? Make sure you're patient and you react on what the receiver is giving you. And I think also that's real important in terms of having a proper rep off of a release, okay? And then obviously it's playing your hands. So how do you play your hands with that receiver? So we do it a little bit different than what I've seen most of the time. And that depends on release points. So we're going to talk about release points, and depending on the release point of the receiver, are we going one hand? Are we going two hand? And if we're going one hand, which hand is it? Is it the near hand or the far hand? Are we flipping hips or staying square? So those are all things we'll discuss in the drills a little bit later. Now, in terms of your hands, all right, you want to dissociate your feet and your hands. So you're not trying to, with your hands anyway, you're not trying to destroy the receiver or keep him on the line. You're trying to catch him and make him go through you, right? So you want to make sure you become an obstacle to him running his route instead of trying to be the aggressor. Because I think if you're the aggressor, you're giving him a chance to have that counter move, to use his hands again or your hands against you and have a free release afterwards, right? So you want to make sure you do not commit too much. Now, once the receiver has released, it's important to keep contact with your hands. Make sure you lean on the receiver, so be physical. And then obviously at the end of the day, you want to play the ball, right? So if you're in a good position, make a play on that ball for sure. The techniques and drills, so really the meat of the presentation obviously is we're going to talk about stance quickly, okay? We're not going to reinvent the wheel there. It's pretty straightforward. Then we're going to talk about leverage. So there's two drills I use that allow our DBs to understand leverage and how they want to play with leverage on the receiver. So there's one drill we're playing lateral leverage and vertical leverage on another one. We'll have some line of scrimmage drills. So we're going to work on different releases and those aiming points. And now we're going to involve hands in there. And then we're going to talk about downfield play. So how do we play, after that release, the different drills we're going to use for that.
Perfect.
So stance, right off the bat. So you're going to see here, Georgia, right? They have that inside foot a little bit back, all right? I don't have an issue with that. I like a little bit more of an even stance. This is a little bit back, so it's fine by me. You're going to see they have a nice knee bend, right? The shoulders are over the knees, over the toes. So weight is really on the balls of their feet, right? The weight is not on the heels. So they're in proper position to really back off an inch. So we're going to talk about inch right after, but really back off. I really like that the DB on the left here, his eyes are looking down right at the hips and the feet. So even if there's no receiver, when you just work on stance, you want to make sure your DBs, kind of get a hang of what you want right away. So make sure they have proper body language all the time. And, I don't like his hands here. They're a little bit low to me. I'd rather have the right DB's hands a little bit higher towards the knee. That way you have less time. Your time of reaction is condensed, right? You can move your hands faster and get your hands on the receiver's chest a little bit faster. So to me, that's just, key points, right? So knees, shoulders over knees, over toes, weight on the balls of the feet, hands ready, right? We want loose hands. I don't want them jacked up, right? And you're kind of all stuck in here, but loose hands on the top of the feet, on the top of the knees, sorry, and eyes looking at the right place right away. So head language is fine.
Perfect.
First drill, right? And again, that's a drill where we could do at any position. I mean, most of you guys probably do it just a mirror, right? I know the receivers will do that in terms of their stock block drill as well. So just basically the point is just to understand leverage laterally with the receiver, right? So just as you see here on the top of Iowa, right? They have two cones set up. The DB has his hands on the back, and the receiver will basically just be moving laterally on the line, right? The point again is really just to maintain inside leverage. So we want to be inside leverage would be our outside, the outside of our shoulder, right? Just inside the pec of the receiver, right? So we'll be like half a man inside. We want to keep that 1 yard off. And when we work that drill, we're going to work that drill with hands in the back. So you see your Baylor at the bottom, they have hands out. The reason why we work it hands in the back is really because we want our DBs only to focus on their feet. All right. And one thing that's important here, and I think that's overlooked often, is how we move our feet, right? So we don't want to be jumping around to get to that receiver. So, it's a simple thing, but if both feet are in the air, you can change direction, right? So we always want to be pushing and replacing. We always have one foot on the ground, and we're in a good position to change direction and to keep leverage with or inside that receiver. Okay. Again, always maintaining proper leverage with our body, right? So again, shoulders over knees, over toes, always eyes looking at the hips and feet of the receiver. The second drill we're going to use in terms of leverage, and that's really where things get interesting, is that inch and kick drill. All right. So you see the setup right here. Okay. We'll have a receiver and a DB again, just 1 yard off, half a man inside, regular, inside leverage that we want to keep. Okay. And now the receiver will have a 5 yard window vertically. Okay. To basically just change direction. So we're going to ask him to either go vertical, 45 degrees inside, 45 degrees outside, and you can play with that for 5 yards. All right. So vertical, inside, outside, vertical, outside, inside, as he wants. Okay. And again, the point here is not for the receiver to look like, or the DB playing the receiver to look like a superhuman, right? We really just want him to play like 50% off, just a little jog through so that the DB can work on his technique. All right. Now the two techniques we're involving here are the kick and the inch technique. So inch really speaks for itself. It's basically a 6-inch steps that we're going to be taking backwards. All right. So if the DB the receiver wants to go vertical, we just want to inch backwards with those 6-inch steps and keep our yard cushion or half a yard cushion. Okay. Through that, we don't want to involve the hands yet. Okay. We don't want the receiver to get through us for now. We're really just working on keeping that early leverage, right? Again, to me, that early depth leverage, okay, or that 1 yard leverage will allow for us to be patient with the receiver's move, right? So we don't want to be committing off that first move and right away jump on him or right away put a hand out. So basically just feather out or inch back and give him time to make all his fantasies there, okay? And then if we're going in an inside move or an outside move, or inside step or outside step for the receiver, we'll basically kick. All right. So the kick for me is a little bit like a weave. We just won't get as much width, okay? So our steps will be a little more choppy, and we'll really push and replace a little bit like we were doing in the mirror drill, push and replace, always pushing with the foot opposite to the direction we're going. So if you look here at the bottom, right, we have the receiver going on an outside step or an outside release, right, where the DB is pushing with his left leg, so his away leg, so his inside leg, right, and just basically dragging his outside leg and then replacing with the inside leg. Again, that allows him to keep that 1 yard cushion or that half a yard cushion, okay? It allows him to keep that inside leverage as well, and not just get completely out of place with the receiver. Again, the key point here, and you see it with the 3 different techniques, is gain depth, right? So make sure you keep that 1 yard leverage. I think off the line, if you get too close to a receiver, and I said it a little bit earlier, but you're giving him a chance to have that counter move, right? So make sure you force him to declare, and then we're going to play hands, and then we're going to play physical with him. All right?
Going through this drill, Coach, are you asking your defensive players to keep their shoulders square? Is that something you need to focus on in this one, do you think?
Yeah, great point, Coach. Yes, we're asking the DBs to keep hips and shoulders square. So even in that weave, right, I know there's multiple ways to teach weave. Some coaches like to let their butt sink to the sideline. We're really asking that kick technique and that inch technique to have our hips and shoulders as square as possible. Again, that comes back to having a second move or letting the receiver, play with us a little bit and make sure we react. Is the second we commit an open shoulders or open hips, right, we're giving a chance for that counter move, right? So early on, right at the snap, right at the first move, we want to be patient, just gain depth, inch, and kick on top of that receiver.
Perfect.
Good point, Coach. Then we're going to work on all those releases. Again, that's one thing I said a little bit earlier, and where we put a lot of emphasis on is in proper hands and how we want to use our hands. Okay, so that's the first drill we're going to involve hands in. It's basically the exact same setting, right? So a receiver on the line, DB 1 yard off, inside leverage, exactly the same thing. Now, the only thing we're going to have as the receiver is basically give us a release. So we don't want him to run a route, okay? We want him to give us one of those 4 releases, all right? So he's either just going to go straight vertical and try to run through us, okay? He's going to go inside release, so they just try to break our leverage inside and gain the inside on us. He's going to try to have an outside leverage or outside release, and now there's 2 different ways we do it, right? So the outside release, and that's where it's important for the hands, is if it gives us an outside release, a little bit like he would do in a rub route and try to get through us, right, just to create a screen for another DB, then we will want to stick vertical or square on him and just kick outside. Again, we're going to look at that in a sec. And then if we have a wide release, well, then that's the time where we're going to open up and really come with that outside hand. Okay. So in terms of the vertical release, just to get back through those real quick. Okay. The vertical release, as we said just before, we're going to inch. Okay. So we're going to take vertical depth, 6-inch steps just to stick on top of that receiver. And when he breaks our cushion, we're going to use a 2-hand jam in this situation. Okay. So we're going to have our closed hand, which will be right in the middle of his chest, and then our away hand, which would be on his near pec, okay, or the pec near to us. That way we're still steering him towards the outside. We're still forcing him to have an outside release and keeping that inside leverage. But because he's vertical to us, we need to be a little bit more physical with him. So we're going to use that 2-hand jam. Again, real important, I said it earlier, is dissociate your feet and your hands, right? So we don't want to be leaning into that jam and jumping forward. We want to keep a good body position. Our stance shouldn't change, right? We're just going to use our hands to create that separation and force and steer the receiver outside. If we get that inside release and the receiver just tries to cross our face, we'll kick an inch inside, just like the drill we're doing before, kick an inch inside. And as soon as the receiver will try to break our cushion, so it gets into our bubble, then we'll bring our close hand punch, and we'll bring that punch to his near pick to us. So again, if the receiver already changing direction, so his shoulders are already breaking towards the inside and his hips are already breaking towards the inside, where our near hand will be on our near pec to him. If he started going back vertical and we were able to maintain that inside leverage, well, then our hand would still be to the near pec to us, but then that pec would be the opposite pec in terms of our relationship to him. All right. Again, if we get a close outside release, the reason here, okay, to me for that, the difference between those two, so the wide release and just the outside release, is on a close outside release, I won't want to open my hips and protect the fade just yet, all right? Because that's a situation where you could have some sort of a club or a swim back inside by the receiver, and then you could end up with a slant route, right, being wide open because we have to speed turn as a DB, right? So if we just get kind of a punch outside step or just a quick 1-2 tight step towards the outside, we'll simply kick on top of that, all right? If he breaks our cushion, we'll close hand punch. If he doesn't break our cushion, we'll stick on top of him. And once he redirects to that route, then we'll break and make sure we use the proper hand once that happens. All right. Now, if we just get a wide release, and that we're going to have some of those examples in the video, right? But if we get a wide release and the receiver really just tries to get away from us, well, then we'll open our hips, bring that far hand, right, on that near shoulder. And now we're going to try to lean on him and force him to the sideline as much as possible to cancel the space that he has running his route. Okay, so we'll basically protect the fade right away when we have that wide release. Now the next is just basically pictures, okay, and examples of what those techniques look like. And I don't want to be criticizing Vanderbilt and Baylor, obviously, right? Their programs have done way more than I did, but if you look here at the bottom, okay, on the vertical release, so that receiver just gave him a vertical release, so he's using both his hands, all right? Now, the only thing I don't like is his base is a little wide, his hips are a little high, all right? So we'd like to keep a little bit more of the earlier stands that we looked at, but he's using both hands, he's being physical with that receiver, and now he's ready to run with him, okay? That second rep, the inside release, okay, that's a very good job, and that goes to what I was saying in terms of receiver angle, but, right, receiver gave him an inside release. We had that kick inside. We kept early depth. Right now, the receiver's breaking our cushion. We're bringing our near hand, right, to his near pec. Now, his near pec to us is this pec right here. Okay, so the right pec. If the receiver had gone back vertical, his right pec would be his left pec, right? So we wouldn't want to be having that aiming point to that shoulder. We want to stick and have just the closest punch we can get, right? So we're just trying to have that closest aiming point to us. Really, the point is just to disrupt timing and force him around us. Now here, you have a close outside release, right? He's basically trying to get through our shoulder and vertical. In this case, right, as I said, just kick on top of him, use that close hand. Now, if you look at his left foot right here, it's telling you he's reaching a little bit. He's a little bit out of his base. So we'd like that left foot to replace right away underneath his left hip. So he's in a better position to open up after and run with him, all right? And then the right far example, the wide release, receiver just gave a wide outside release. So right away we push with our inside leg. Now we're opening up our hips and we're ready to put our hand on his shoulder and get ready to lean on him and close his space for that fade route.